Okay, so once you got into the best shape of your life and you've consolidated, you've got out of the danger zone where the rebound is at its essentially the biggest threat, you've really got a number of different choices you can take from there when it comes to how do you actually stay in shape. Whilst it sounds straightforward, like, yeah, lose the weight and then keep it off, we know from experience that it's not the case of, yeah, I wanted to keep it off, so let's just keep it off. We've got to anchor the journey in a way where keeping it off ties to a new evolved why or a new evolved goal. So what we've done in more recent weeks and months is identified effectively 6 different roadmaps you can take in the investment phase, which is the phase where you're rewiring your behavior, mindset, and identity to build a lifestyle solution where you can stay in shape. So these 6 different roadmaps have we're going to term them investment avatars. So in this episode, we're going to dive into the 6 different avatars that you can embody and the 6 different roadmaps that they take in order to guide you to the elusive reward phase where you're in great shape year round and you don't have to worry about anything to do with your fitness. So let's go one by one, and we'll kick it off with you, Ed, to introduce the first one, the lifestyler.
So the lifestyler is the perfect approach really for anyone who's hit checkpoint, is in a good place, a happy place with their health, their fitness, how they're looking. And then really just wants to use the physical for the vehicle for other things. So potentially they've been overweight all their life. They're now in a healthy weight range. They now have confidence in how they're looking, but they don't necessarily have massive physical goals. They've kind of ticked that box and are kind of happy where they're at. So that's not going to be a complete maintenance phase. There's still going to be a progressive element to their training, to their cardio, etc. The main purpose for their physical activity and around their nutrition is keeping them in this sweet spot so they can basically achieve other things. So like use the physical as a vehicle, whether it's to be a more active parent, have more confidence at work, whatever it is, but to use that as kind of the foundation. So for someone in this position, they'd be looking to, throughout their consolidation phase, get to, as I alluded to, like that sweet spot range. So a body weight range where they're happy with how they're looking, got loads of energy, sleeping well, mood's good, low food focus, just a really sustainable place from that perspective. And then holding there basically just to milk that. Because once you're in that sweet spot, that's when you're firing at your best and you can then, perform well in all those areas. So yeah, that would be the synopsis for the lifestyler.
So who would benefit from being a lifestyler? Like who's a typical lifestyler that tends to get drawn into that roadmap?
I'd say the main type of person is probably someone who doesn't love physical activity. And it doesn't mean that it's not going to be still a part of their routine or their week if you don't go down this road. But it's not someone who gets really excited by physical pursuits that we're probably going to go on to as some of the other avatars. It's someone who probably wants to make this healthier lifestyle as sustainable as possible and as effortless as possible. So it frees them up as much time for other things. So maybe that is, I've said, family and work, but it could even be other hobbies, maybe like, music, whatever, like these other things can then have more space in their life. And so by making it more effortless, it's for people who are, really wanting to streamline their activity as much as possible, really. So get as much bang for your buck out of training and cardio. But also a massive one for these people is around nutrition. So not having to weigh everything to the gram, really moving away from tracking everything. Now, how far away you move from tracking is going to be individual, but really getting to moving towards that kind of intuitive eating, or at least less tracked route, while still being able to stay, as I said, in that sweet spot range. That's probably going to be one of the main characteristics of a lifestyler.
Out of interest, how untracked are you now?
So myself is, I think this is a weird one for me to answer, because internally I feel very unrestricted and very probably the most relaxed and just free I've ever had. When I actually think about it, I eat 28 meals a week, 4 a day, 7 days a week. I'm probably only having 2 untracked meals a week, which is not very much. But for me, it's not. It's more comes down to a case of just, for me, that is just how I streamline it. I like to just batch cook. I like to free up as much time across the week as possible. And then, my life, just the way it is with work, having a young family, is kind of just, it's not crazy unpredictable. I mean, it's unpredictable, I guess, a little bit with kids, but it's fairly routine based. So for me, just going through it and I'm not having to face loads of these different challenges on a day-to-day basis. So a couple of meals over the weekend if we're out and about. But in the week, I personally find it less stressful, more of a lifestyle solution for me, not to have to prep from scratch or think about what I'm eating from scratch each meal. But yeah, I've got the skills too. And, if I do take a week off work or we go away or anything like that, then there's no stress from going untracked for a week or whatever from there. And normally, if anything, I end up just dropping a little bit of weight. So it's good little mini cuts for me, normally a holiday.
Yeah, one thing I remember you saying, and it always stuck with me, is it's easier to put the bowl on the scale than it is to sit there and guess how much you're eating. And and it sounds strange, but it is really easy just to put the bowl on the scale and count 40 grams of oats, as opposed to thinking, is that looking at 40 grams of oats, or is that not?
Yeah, and
even though you probably nail it.
Oh yeah, and the thing is, like, if you are a bit hungrier, what you think, eyeballing is a very subjective thing, and it doesn't mean you can't do it successfully. But if you're a bit hungrier one day, that 40 grams might look a bit bigger, might be a bit bigger than actually what it normally is. And for the sake of just putting it on a scale, like for me, there's no mental stress in it, and I don't think there's any real physical time increase from there. So
yeah,
it's I personally wouldn't. I wouldn't fall fully into this category. So maybe that's why I don't line up with it 100%. But yeah, I know a lot of people just don't want to, or just want more variety, or for whatever reason. I think a lot of the time it comes down to socializing and families.
Yeah.
And so I think it can work really well. But
do you know how many calories you're eating?
I roughly know. Yes, I think it's around 3,800. I think. Again, this is something where I don't actually, when I say I'm tracking my food, I just have kind of like a fairly set baseline for meals. And then when I do go untracked or off plan or whatever you want to call it, I just kind of make just a sensible swap in my head. So it's not, I don't use my Fitbit. I'm not tracking. I think the initial baseline was tracked initially, and then it's just kind of just progressed from there. So yeah, maybe not the tracking that people listening might be thinking. I haven't got my fitness pal out 4 times a day trying to do maths on that.
Well, that's part of this whole like effectively, like, well, how good can it get is probably what I'm trying to poke at, but also how different it can be. Like, your definition of untracked is still a lot of structure, but it's structure without stress. I think that's the key thing here. Ivan, what about you?
Yeah, I still track everything, but that's more so because I'm always experimenting. I always want to see how my body responds to different calorie loads, especially with my fluctuations when it comes to training. Some days I can cycle up to 3.5 hours a day. Like, I'm going to need to make sure that I'm actually consuming enough on those days so I don't wither away, right? So
you're the athlete, right? You got to eat, otherwise.
Yeah. Well, if I was to listen to my appetite naturally, like, I probably would end up under eating, similar to Ed, right? Like, if I go on holiday untracked or what have you, I'll probably just come back lighter. So yeah, holidays. Whenever I do go on holidays, like a mini cut as well. But no, I think it all comes down to your perception of the whole thing, right? So if tracking everything or weighing yourself or whatever you want to do, if it's adding so much stress to your life, then you have to find a different alternative, different strategy that is going to suit that, right? But what you also need to understand that whatever method you select and whatever avatar you go down, you have to also accept the trade-offs with that. Okay, so if you don't want the stress of tracking things and not weighing things, okay, well, then you also have to accept that you're not going to be as accurate with your intake as you are, which could then potentially lead to more fat gain over the long term. And now, is that something that you're happy with? Great, but if you wanted to sort of keep your weight within this narrow range, and if you wanted to keep on the leaner side for a long period of time, you're going to have to track something. You're going to have to be quite accurate with that over the long term. And the leaner you want to stay, and the more the leaner you want to stay, the more you're going to have to take into account. But that's a decision that you're going to have to come up with, right? Is it worth tracking every morsel of food to stay within a certain weight range, right? Or are you happy to maybe be a little bit heavier, but not have to worry about tracking and weighing everything that you consume? So nice. I think it comes down on a spectrum. Yeah.
Well, what we're going to do in the next part of this series is actually break down exactly how to go from fully tracked to completely untracked, and whatever that version is. So we'll come up with different scenarios and actually show the roadmap, because I think it's one thing to hear like how untracked we are now. It's another thing of like, how do you actually get there without the stress? So we'll break down step by step, like the different routes you can take on the next one. Before we do that, let's move on to the next avatar, the lean builder.
Cool. So the lean builder is for anyone who hits checkpoint and then thinks, what, I'd love to have a little bit more muscle. And whether that's from a longevity perspective, thinking, it's really clear that having more muscle than we probably organically have or would naturally have is going to be advantageous for kind of how long we live, but also more linked to even quality of life as we get older. Or it can just be down to aesthetic and performance reasons as well. And I think most of us, I can definitely say I fall in this boat. You think you got more muscle than you have, you take the fat off, and you have a bit of a reality check, and you think, you know what, those sleeves on my t-shirt, maybe it wasn't massive biceps padding them out. The old leggings a bit loose around your bum now, or maybe it wasn't my really big glutes. Actually, maybe I was holding a bit more body fat there. And so yeah, a lot of us want to then start to build a bit more muscle for the reasons mentioned. Now, there's a few different approaches you can take with this, and we'll probably cross a couple more with the other avatars. But the lean builder is what I would recommend for, I'm going to say 99% of our clientele, and I'd say 99% of just general gym users out there. And this is kind of what people might have heard online, just like the lean bulk, or that kind of thing. But it's basically trying to gain muscle over time, but without excess body fat. And although I think maybe depending on what you've listened to or read online, you think, I need to just be eating 10,000 calories a day and pushing body weight up 5 kilos a week, or whatever it is. But muscle, the reality is what actually is the absolute necessities for building muscle is progressive overload. So normally going to come in the form of resistance training. So basically, in simple terms, getting stronger in the gym over time, combined with sufficient protein intake. They're your two absolute essentials. Now, having more calories to assist with that can potentially help, but actually, if you look at a lot of the research out there, there's not that much directly on that. And the whole thought of you needing a surplus to build more muscle is actually I think it's, when you actually look into it, it's more of a bro assumption than actual really put down in evidence. And so if you have just hit shredded in a state in a checkpoint, you're definitely going to need to put some body fat on. But through your consolidation phase, you should get to the point where you're in a sustainable place from a lifestyle perspective. And then from there, potentially you might be in a perfect position just to enter this lean builder phase where you maintain a sweet spot body weight and you just focus on progressing in the gym. And it's not going to be an overnight transformation potentially as it would be say over the fat loss phase where you're seeing really big changes on a weekly or monthly basis. But depending on your training age, on a 3, 6, 9 month basis, you potentially are going to see visual changes in progress photos. It's not going to be night and day, but it's staying within that same weight range. Suddenly you're leaner, you've got more muscle. And so, I think it's a great approach for a lot of people, because if you've been overweight for the majority of your life up to this point, do you really want to go into this big bulk where you're putting on a load of body fat? Health-wise, if you have been overweight for a long period of your life, I'd say it makes a bit more sense from a health perspective to stay in this sweeter spot from a health perspective, but also from a confidence perspective, all these things you're finally now happy with how you're looking. If you've got anyone who's gone through a more of a bulk kind of approach, we can all attest to it does get to a point where actually you like how you're looking less, or you feel a bit more self-conscious because the t-shirt starts being a bit tighter around the waist or whatever it is. So from all those perspectives, I think the trade-off is often a lot better. And I think also just finish this off is that for most people who go to the gym, the limiting factor in their ability to build muscle is their training, not their calories. And so if training's the limiting factor, that's the bottleneck for your progress. Adding more calories and more body fat that comes with that isn't going to solve it. It doesn't make, all that does is just fat gain. And so making sure that training is the real focus is, I think, the often overlooked kind of element there.
What do you think are some potential risks of being a lean builder, Ivan? Where can people go wrong in this period?
Yeah, there are a few. I think potentially trying to stay too lean, trying to stay too close to your checkpoint condition, and again, leanness is gonna depend on the person and what they define as lean and whatnot. But yeah, I think a huge mistake is trying to stay too close to checkpoint weight, thinking that you have to maintain that same level of conditioning, which is just not the case. But what was the question? Some mistakes? Or
mistakes as being a lean builder. Yeah. What kind of mistakes can you make?
Yeah, I think what Ed said earlier, thinking that it's more calories that are required to drive your progression and to keep making gains, when in fact it's always I'm always going to be looking at someone's training performance as well as what they're doing outside the gym, such as recovery, sleep, all that stuff, before even looking at a calorie bump. But I think a mistake is focusing on a weight target. That's a big one for a lean builder. They're I have to be at this weight by this time. I think that's not the right approach. I think, especially if you're working with a coach that's going to be monitoring your progress, it's more about the visual look that you're going for, as well as the progress in the gym. So I would say for a lean builder, letting go of what the number on the scale is would probably be a massive one, and sort of just let that be what it is as you progress throughout your journey. Use progress pics as your main thing. Use performance metrics as your main thing. That's obviously going to be the most important. But let go of thinking I need to be X weight. I think that's a huge mistake that a lot of people make.
I think the big one is, as a lean builder, your food's probably not going to change that much. It's just that it's the training performance. And I think another mistake is you probably won't see. You have to be a really patient person when you're being a lean builder, because I was definitely of the opinion, like many years ago, that to get maximum muscle gain, you need to go all in on muscle building, and we will cover that. And I still think, to an extent, like for that period in your life, if you can just have a really aggressive period, it works. But I think it's only really good for like you people in your 20s. Like, I just wouldn't recommend it to when you're in your 40s or even like late 30s. You may be able to get away with it. But also it depends on where you've come from. But I think patience is such a big one, because muscle building takes so long. And if you're holding weight in a certain period and your gym progression's only inching up slowly as well, you can kind of get a bit like, what's the point of doing this? So you've just got to play the game of like, how do I get my lifts up over the next 12 months versus like, is it going to go up? Are my lifts going to go up 1% a week? Like my body fat was coming down on the way down, because it's just not going to be the same.
Yeah, and I'll also say even just overall training volume as well, and just how much you can take. I think that also has to be taken into consideration. Like, I don't think you have to change your program massively when you go into this phase. You don't have to be doing a ton of volume, a ton of this, a ton of that, because the leaner you stay, you also got to realize there's going to be a cap on your recovery too. And you just have to accept that as well.
Yeah, I think just with expectations around progress in the gym, I think people expect a lot in the short term, probably the same in terms of fat loss, but they want a lot in terms of short term. Why is my bench press not going up 5 kilos each week? But then when they actually span out, because they'll try and add 5 kilos a week, they span out, and over the course of 6 months, it doesn't go anywhere, because they put 5, then 10, then 15, then they get hurt, then they have to start again. Whereas if you actually just take it a bit slower and steadier, so a bit closer to what we say in terms of fat loss, of like just keep chipping that away at that 1% per week, after 6 months, you're over 25% down. Whereas instead of doing these crash starts and repeating every couple of months. But if you're going, in training, just trying to progress, when you do add weight, add as little as possible. So if you're using a barbell, put a 1.25 kilo on each side. If you then hit the top of your rep range, just do the same again. And over time, that really starts to accumulate. And I used this example in a coach call the other day, that basically if you have a rep range of say 8 to 12, and each week you add 1 rep, so you go from 8 reps to 9 reps, 10, 11, 12, and then you add 1.25 kilos on. You're not going to be able to do that every single week. But if you do that every other week, I think it still works out as like a 20 or 25 kilo weight increase across a 12-month period, which is massive and is way more than 99% of people in the gym. Like, how many people in the gym you go to, their deadlift is exactly the same as it was a year ago? And like, yeah, they might be doing these big progressions here and there, but like I said, then they just go take 2 steps backwards. Whereas if you can just be the person who just adds 20, 25 kilos to your deadlift each year, like, yeah, you're not going to be doing like 300 kilo deadlifts in your first year, but it's going to start moving like closer and closer. And this is where I would say, as a general recommendation, if you are in the right weight kind of range for you to be a lean build, so not being super shredded, but when we say lean, it's basically just not, doing this traditional heavy bulk kind of thing. I don't think there's any reason for most people listening to like our type of clientele shouldn't be gaining 20% on all compound lifts across the year. So, whatever you guys are lifting for, say 10 reps, let's say you're doing 100 kilo squat for 10 reps. In a year's time, there's no reason you couldn't be doing 120 for 10 reps. That is a realistic progression across the 12-month period. And some of you, like people listening, could definitely exceed that. Some of you may get the odd injury or whatever, travel a lot, may fall slightly shy. But I think if you're way off the mark, you need to look at the basics, because that is what I don't think that would even be exceptional progress for where most people listening are at in their development.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefit of milking the weight and taking your progression on a monthly basis as opposed to a weekly basis. And that way you just get injured less. Your muscles, your tendons, the ligaments all kind of grow together, as opposed to things outweighing themselves. And then you hear snap, crackle, pop, as we've all done.
I think a big part of that, though, was also just the progressions are actually real. Anyone can keep adding weight to the bar each week, but if your squat loses 2 inches of depth every week, it's not actually progression.
Exactly.
The logbook looks great, but that's why we want to see the training videos, because suddenly there's a discrepancy there, and the back squat that's in your program is very different to the back squat that's actually getting done.
Let's move on to the next avatar.
No,
go on.
No, go next one. That's right.
The athlete. By the way, guys, we're going to do a muscle building specific one on this as well. So we'll go real deep on it. The athlete is the next avatar.
So the athlete is someone who's hits checkpoint, still wants to progress physically, but potentially has slightly different physical goals. So I think the most traditional, once you hit a checkpoint or do a photo shoot, is then I want to get more muscle. But this is for anyone with a slightly different goal. So whether it's like more of a cardio component, so for example, want to run a marathon, want to do something along those sides, or potentially just improve sports performance. So whether that's I play 5-a-side football on a Sunday, just want to really just get better at that. I've had clients do white collar boxing fights, things like that. So it's anything that's outside of kind of the traditional resistance training, muscle building kind of route. So it can look a variety of different things, but it tends to be based normally around a cardio challenge or a sports style performance. So the approach here really is keeping body weight in a range that's going to support whatever that performance is. It's not normally going to be too different, I wouldn't have thought, to the lean builder in terms of they're on the leaner side of things, but in that healthy range, and a range they're able to sustain without too much effort. But then the priority here is on that athletic performance. So whether that is running or boxing, whatever it is. So cardio and resistance training will still be elements, but they'll all be built in to support that main goal. So for example, if it was, let's say, tennis performance, there may be a couple of training sessions across the week in order to help prevent injuries, aid tennis performance, but always ensuring that the person is fresh for their matches. That tennis training is taking priority to the other things. The cardio is supporting tennis performance, so it's all kind of built to that singular goal.
Yeah, we had a few really good examples of this in more recent times, and I think it'll become a more and more popular option, especially for those who potentially don't enjoy the gym that much and see gym as more of a means to an end. But I've always had an interest in doing 5Ks. Running seems to be a popular one here, but a couple of examples is, we had Shafali who did a checkpoint and then a month later knocked 70 minutes off her previous marathon time, just because now she's in a much better shape. We had Devin who lost 35 kilos in 2023, won a white collar fight in 30 seconds in 2024. We've had a couple of other cool ones. Yusuf, who's excelling in his tennis. Is it club
badminton? He's taking racket sports by storm at the moment, Yusuf.
Yes, he's dominating the racket world. We had Ian who knocked 30 minutes off his marathon time as well.
And 30 minutes for Ian is about 2 hours to the rest of us.
Went 3:15 to 2:45, which is insane. So we've had some really good examples of this, and then obviously the epitome Ivan, who's the ultimate athlete. So tell us about what life is like being an athlete.
I just do things that no one else does. They got no one to compare me to, Yeah. What do you want to know? I guess it's just about balancing everything, right? So
what are the risks as an athlete, in terms of balancing? Because that is a big one, and that people really struggle with, of just burning out, right? I've really struggled with that. So maybe talk about that.
Yeah. So when it comes to the athlete avatar, you have this desire to always want to be training, always want to be moving. You're very driven by physical goals, which is a great thing. But it can also be a curse too, right? It can be what drills you into the ground, because you think you can do it all, or you think that, if I do cardio and then I do my weights and this and that, they don't impact each other and I don't have to worry about it, this and that. And unfortunately, that is not the case. Cardio training especially can be very, 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 very draining, especially on the central nervous system and whatnot, and you may not feel the impacts of that in the short term, especially if you just do zone 2 cardio. If you're not conditioned, or if you're not fit and you keep pushing the zone 2 stuff, you keep pushing it, and a lot of people do zone 2 too hard. You were guilty of that as well, AB. You know, you were.
Yeah. I wasn't doing zone 2. I was just doing like.
Yeah, you were doing
our zone 2 is actually zone 4. You're like. We justify it as zone 2, but.
My Garmin was red, and I was doing it 3-4 times a week, and I was gassed every time.
Yeah,
do you remember when I was doing the cut in 2022, and I was doing the stepper, and I was like on level 14 on the stepper, hammering it for 40 minutes, and you were like, dude, like you need to calm down. And by the end, I was doing it level 10, but I was hanging on for dear life on that stepper.
I remember before your fight, you were like doing like little top up cardio sessions. You were hitting PBs on 5Ks.
The perfect example of how to not be an athlete, guys. All your training must be geared towards your actual event, right? So, yeah. So I guess if when it comes to being the athlete, it's about learning how to manage all the things that you're doing, right? And an example that I was doing prior to hiring a good coach who understood this type of stuff was I was doing maybe 3-4 hard interval sessions per week on the bike, in combination with like 6-7 days in the gym doing the cross stuff and the handstand stuff. And I was like, why the hell am I so burnt out? Oh, wonder why, And then once I actually pulled it back, and now these days I'll do like 2 hard interval sessions on the bike, and I'll do like maybe 4 or 5 sessions in the gym, which still may sound like a lot, but in comparison to what I was doing before, right? It wasn't sustainable. And now I'm actually making like continuous progress. I've learned to listen to my body. I've learned to listen to the signs of overtraining, overreaching, and whatnot. And I have a lot of metrics that I keep tabs on, right? So it's all about it just becomes this balancing act. And then you actually can make really, really good progress if you learn to do this dance quite nicely. And again, that takes time. That takes I've had to hire a coach to help me out with that as well. And, we're going to be there for our members too, because it's very, very hard to do this on your own. Very, very hard to do.
How long does it take to, because it's something I think about often is like, I look at my training volume and I think it's not that high. Like it's okay. Yeah, like, I think it's higher than what our members would be doing, but it's, I don't look at it and think that's unrealistic, but I still get burnt out from it. Right. So how long does it actually take to adapt to a higher level of volume that you need to progress as an athlete whilst living a normal life and having all the stresses that we're not full-time athletes, or I'm certainly not.
No. Well, that's going to be very individual to the person, but this is where it helps just working with someone. So what I would recommend, especially for our members, is tracking like their biofeedback in their dashboard. So paying attention to libido, paying attention to energy, mood, stress, sleep, all those things become very, very important metrics to keep tabs on as you are also doing your check-ins, right? So I'll always be looking at that dashboard, especially for the people who I know who are doing a combination of cardio and strength training, have big goals, because I want to see how their body is feeling, right? And the one of the easiest ways to know if someone is doing too much is just going to be like, okay, well, all these marks are like 1 out of 5.
Yeah.
So, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what's written on paper. What matters is how that plan integrates with your lifestyle. You know what I mean? So there's always going to be this trade-off. And again, I know there are cyclists out there who do 25, 30 hours a week on the bike. I'm like, what the fuck is that? You must have no job or what have you, right? But a lot of our members, they have a lot of responsibilities. They have work. We all work too. Like I may seem like I live like an elite athlete, but in comparison to other people who do this type of stuff, I'm nothing. I'm doing barely anything. I'm maybe 20% of what a lot of people do. So we need to consider that as well. It's not just what you can do in the gym, or not what you can just do on the bike or on the track. It's more about how does all that impact your day-to-day life, right? And also it depends on your job, depends on how much time you spend working, your sleep. All this stuff is going to determine how much you can actually handle from a volume perspective.
Is it the same as the example you gave, Ed, around like, in progressive overload in the gym, you're adding 5 kilos a week. And then the same thing with this cardio or sports, you just start adding the volume and you never really give yourself that time to build up. So you just get hurt, go back to the beginning, hurt or ill or whatever.
I think that's definitely a big part of it. And I think I said to you the other day, the issue I think both of us have run into with running is that I guess in the gym, you can just keep adding sets if you want. But I think neither of us really fall into that trap. And I think really we're just limited by like how our rate of progression in terms of adding weight and reps, which kind of naturally restrains us. But I think both of us with running, it's like, say I ran 10 miles last week, let's just say, there's one I did run 11 this week, and then one I just run 12 this week. And you end up doing this, progressing things probably way beyond what you really should. I know when you if you ever search like biggest mistake of hybrid training, or you look at any of these hybrid training guys like Alex Blennis we had on the podcast, every person who says like the biggest mistake is basically adding a resistance training program in isolation, a cardio training in isolation, and just slapping them together. And I've literally done that a million times. Like that was, I look back at most of my training life, that's what I've done. Because you thought, oh, this is the squat program, it's going to add 20 kilos to my squat. Well, this is the sub 25k program. I'll do them both, and I'll get, it's like, but it doesn't really work like that, because you've just got these two programs which are, that the squat program is meant to take 90 to 100% of your recovery, like how much recovery you've got. The 5k program's doing that as well. You smash them together, and then you end up getting the worst of both worlds. So I think that's definitely a big element of it. I think the other element of it, which I think is massive with us, but also like a lot with our members, is factoring that lifestyle perspective. Yeah. Because what I think when we look at athletes or we chat to people, whatever it is, like what you're talking about, my program doesn't look that much on paper or doesn't seem that crazy, and it's not compared to like these full-time athletes. But then you also factor in how many hours a day you're working. It's like you've got a lot on your plate from that perspective. Obviously, they've got SEA now, and it's like all of these other things that's happening in, and we've got this bucket of recovery. And for a lot of us, and even more so for a lot of our members, their bucket's already 80% emptied just from work and travel and family before they even get onto physical activity. And like, I think, like, just going back to Yusuf, the RNT's Roger Federer, he's a great example because he's got a couple of kids, he's an entrepreneur, he travels quite a lot. So like when we are just like when he is putting everything together, all of these things have to be factored in. And also when you look at just like the age demographic, a lot of like our members, most are beyond their potential peaks now, because they're now training better than ever. They're probably actually in there the best they've been, but at least from potential perspective, that capacity for recovery is already diminished a little bit. Factor in all this other stuff, and that's where we all have, well, anyone who this kind of mentality kind of like draws you to, we want to do more, we want to add the run, then also do this. But the reality is, if your bucket's already pretty much empty, you haven't just go bang for your buck. Maybe that is a couple of training sessions, or like 2-3 training sessions, 2-3 cardios. But I mean, and it doesn't sound that much when you listen to your favorite CrossFit athlete or whatever, but the reality is you're still doing way more than the average person. The average person still thinks you're mental if you're doing 3 gym sessions and 2 cardio every week. So it's maybe just an expectations thing as well, isn't it?
It's addictive as well. Like, because what happens is before you get hurt or you get ill, you feel really good. And you're like, I'm crushing it, smashing through everything, PBs every week, or you're improving every week. You feel good, energy's high, and then it just hits you, isn't it? You wake up and you're sniffing, and you're like, oh no, I know what's happening. Or you tweak your ankle or something like that. And I think that's where it happens. You think everything's going well,
but my ego just starts running away with itself. Oh, I can lift this. The next day I can do this, and like I love it too much, and the ego gets in the way. And then
I heard this one fantastic quote from, because this is very prominent in the endurance world. It's called intensity discipline. So if this is perfect with people like us, is like, not letting our ego get in the way. But like, you plan like this session, you're like, I'm just going to go easy zone 2. And then you see someone run past you, like, not on my watch, not today.
I do that walking around the supermarket.
That's why I ride indoors on my own.
So I got this knee issue at the moment where I can't go under 5:30 at speed. So I'm like keeping myself disciplined at 6. And then yesterday, I was in on Sunday. Yesterday, someone just started trotting past me, and he was going like quite far ahead. And I was thinking to myself, what speed he's going at? And I looked at my watch. I'm going at 6:10. And he's like, he's probably like 5:40, 5:30. And he was getting further and further away from me. And it was the hardest thing in my head, because I was like, the last time I tried to do this, I got hurt, which was last week. It was just painful. Because I was like, I'm on a good day, I could beat him, sort of thing.
Yeah. I was listening to this podcast. For those who are interested, I don't know if you guys have heard of Steven Seiler. He's very into the whole polarized model of training. So if anyone listening, check him out. But he was talking about this lady that she was like a high level runner, like ridiculously good, unbelievable talent. And he said he saw her running once, and she got to the bottom of a hill, and she actually stopped running and walked up the hill, because on that day she prescribed, it was a zone 2 run. It wasn't an uphill like sprint. It wasn't anything like that. And this is coming from a high level athlete who's just very disciplined, right? So it's having that intensity discipline. I know for a lot of other people it's the other way around, but for people who are very motivated like us, who want to push the envelope, we need that side of the discipline thing, right? To not go as hard.
That's been in my head a lot actually this year. Well, was one of my New Year's resolutions kind of thing was stop thinking you're disciplined just because you're doing things that other people find hard. But if you find that easy, that is real discipline. I think for myself, and I'm sure you guys as well, true discipline actually is, oh, shall I do that set? I don't know if it's a good idea. Actually, I won't do it, rather than, oh yeah, if I can't do it. Same thing with, the run, like, oh, I don't feel great today. Maybe I'll cap it at 6K rather than pushing on for the 12K, whatever it is. Like, and actually that requires a lot more discipline. And is, that's a perfect example of what you said around that runner stopping for the hill. I'll be honest, when I see a hill, I'm just in my head, I'm
you're going to go faster.
I'm starting to fight with it.
VO2. Yeah.
But that's actually, it's on the by most people's standards, maybe that is discipline, but in reality it's actually weakness, isn't it really?
Well, I remember reading about the MAF method. You've probably come across this. It's like another version of zone 2 in the running world, and it's basically you find that your maximum anaerobic threshold, and then you have aerobic
heart rate.
MAF. Yeah, is it MAF?
I've heard about mass.
Yeah, I don't know which.
Right.
Yeah, so maybe it's another acronym, but basically it's like you stay under. For me, it's like stay under 144 beats per minute, and you reminded me of it because they were saying like there are going to be times where you have to stop and walk in order to stay in that intensity zone, but the benefits come from that, and it takes 3, 6, 9, 12 months to build up this huge aerobic base. And they don't prescribe, from my understanding anyway, they don't prescribe much interval stuff or fast stuff for a long time until you build up your speed at that heart rate. That's just so hard, isn't it mentally?
People always want to jump to intensity. I'm like, you need to build the base before you jump into intensity, right? Like people who think they're doing HIIT with no aerobic background, like you're not doing HIIT, you're doing nothing.
Well, one of the reasons I think I'm getting burnt out a lot is I think Muay Thai. Like I think I'm doing too much of it, and I think of it. If I look at it just objectively, I think it's like it's an hour long HIIT session. It's just brutal, and then it's your heart rate's so high, and then you get like 1 or 2 minutes like to calm it down. But in that 1-2 minutes, you're doing sit-ups, push-ups, all this other stuff that they're making you do, and then you're back up again. And I was thinking that's what I think I'm finding really hard to recover from, and this sort of tipped me over the edge.
But I think that's where if you have those like high days, any additional cardio then just has to be at the other end of the spectrum, and it just has to be that base building.
That's the polarized, it's the polarized stuff. Yeah. And then to get you be able to handle your Muay Thai sessions, you need a stronger aerobic foundation.
So doing more of the low stuff.
Exactly. For longer, over time.
Yeah, you can see we're all interested in the athlete. We're all interested in the athlete. I mean, we spent.
I think though the type of person this normally attracts is someone who potentially, has been into their training for a while, or at least has a background. So maybe they were into sport as a teenager or a young adult, and then has dropped away as things slip, whatever. But with that, I think comes, I don't know if it's ego or expectations in that, I don't know, let's say you've been training until you're like 25. You let it drop off due to career and family and whatever. You're back with RNT at 40, you hit your checkpoint. In your head, you're still like, oh, I used to back squat 120. I used to do this 5K. That's still your benchmarks. And I think like we can probably all relate to that at some point. But when we get stuck with those benchmarks, I think that's the problem. Going in completely fresh and with no pressure, and it's probably a good way to avoid that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think obviously if you've got that type A personality, this will attract you nicely. If you find an activity you enjoy, because then you can just get lost in it.
That's actually something I was going to touch on when you talked about the gym earlier, was that regardless of your avatar, it's really, really important that whatever physical pursuit you do is something that you enjoy, because and that was why I thought of actually when you said the lean muscle builder, was because the progress is relatively slow from like a muscle building perspective. You're looking at 3, 6, 9 month periods before you're seeing like real tangible progress. And so enjoying it is so important. Like if you want to build some muscle, but you hate going to the gym, it's just never really going to work out. It would be better to shift to something where potentially you can still build a bit of muscle, but you actually enjoy it more. And this is where I think things like CrossFit, for example, could be a good solution for some people, because it may not be optimal for building muscle, but if you've got a community around you, you've got a bit more of like this athletic side of it. So maybe it's just more enjoyable. For some people, it won't be enjoyable, but just an example, you'll build more muscle doing that than doing a gym routine that you absolutely hate. And I think this is where like the athlete side of things can actually appeal to people a lot, because with the athlete side of things, I think not always, but more often than not, community is more linked with that side, whether it is doing a sports team, if you do 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, whatever, you've got these events to go to, and there's normally like a nice buzz. You're kind of mixing with other people. Potentially, if you do events like CrossFit, whatever, strong community vibes. Whereas unless you've got a gym buddy, just doing the muscle building route can be, potentially kind of a bit isolating at times. Obviously, there's the community in RNT, you've got loads of muscle builders in there. But if the community is a really big like selling point or a big push for you, a big driver for you, then the more athletic kind of endeavors are often a bit more linked to that, I found.
I also think with the athlete route, it's harder to experience a death by 1,000 cuts, because if you've always got an athletic pursuit and a goal, you're probably not going to get sloppy. You're not going to get that sloppy with everything else, because you enjoy, you want to run well, you want to compete well, and running is so linked to body fat as well. If that's your pursuit, like gaining weight just adds, like, just makes it harder. So you're going to get slower. So I think it's a good way to keep yourself in check, having some sort of sport that you enjoy doing. And maybe that's the anchor at the beginning until it becomes a lifestyle.
Yeah, it keeps you in shape indirectly. And it's something that you have to think about.
Yeah, sorry, no, go.
No, you go. That was it.
I was going to say the lifestyle is probably the most at risk of death by 1,000 cuts, because whilst they want to have their cake and eat it and move away from untracked eating, they don't enjoy physical exercise. And because they don't enjoy physical exercise, there's at the stage you're at on the journey where it's not embedded into you. It's just so risky.
Mm-hmm. I think with something just to note with the lifestyler as well, if the further away you do move from tracking, as Ivan said, you have to accept the trade-offs there. And although this exact numbers isn't going to be perfect for everyone, your sweet spot completely untracked is probably for most people going to be a couple of kilos heavier than your sweet spot tracked, just because of that kind of room for error. And like a couple of kilos isn't exact, so you can probably put out a better relative percentage kind of thing on there, but it's probably not a bad ballpark for most people. And the more you move away from tracking without these kind of big physical goals, you're probably just holding slightly higher body fat levels for that lifestyle. But I think the athlete mindset is a big one, but I think that's also the key. That mindset is the key to the muscle building approach as well. It's having that, is wanting to get to bed on time because you've got squats in the morning. It's preparing for your session, making sure you're hydrated, so you're going into it like an athlete with their training session. When you're in there, it's giving it your all, wanting to progress. So that athletic mindset, I think, is vital for any of the avatars with physical goals. But yeah, obviously ties in. It's always most obvious with the athlete one for sure.
And what it does, it gives you that anchor to then build that lifestyle solution along the way, because you just start drilling these habits all the time throughout the year, different seasons, different obstacles that may be in the way. Even if you're traveling, if you're still trying to build muscle, you go and find that gym. You'll still stay on track with your food. You won't over consume alcohol, because you want to hit that squat PB, and it's exciting and it's addictive, right? And you want to keep making progress. So I think that it really does lend itself to people who do stay in shape longer and get to that place where then in the future they might just be a lifestyler, where they've built the physique they want, they're happy with what's going on, and now they just want to have their cake and eat it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just on that note, I think a really good indicator that you've really swapped to a performance investor mindset is you look at food, you judge whether or not you're going to consume a food by the way it's going to make you feel, versus whether it's like good or bad, or this is going to make me fat, or when the focus now becomes, if I eat that, I'm just going to feel like death. I'm not going to sleep well. I'm going to have a shitty session tomorrow. I may as well just have a really nice dinner, whatever, digest well, sits well, and I'm going to sleep, have a good night, rest, and then smash my session in the morning. I think once you can make this shift to that mentality, I think this whole game just becomes so easy, because what it said earlier about discipline, right? Like, eating well requires no discipline from us, right? Because it's actually harder to not eat well, right? We would have to be more disciplined. You know what I'm trying to say, right? Like, we don't have to exert any willpower or any discipline to make a good nutritional decision, right? And I think that, again, we've been doing this for such a long time now, but I think it also stems from that performance mindset too. It's like, you know, we want to feel good when we're working, we want to feel good when we're training, and you can't do that by eating garbage all the time, right?
So we've covered 3 investment avatars today. The goal is 6, but we got sidetracked a little bit. So we're going to cover 3 today: the lifestyler, the lean builder, and the athlete. We're going to save we'll save the surprise for the remaining 3 for next week. But as a hint, for those of you wondering, thinking, you know, I want to be an athlete, but I also want to be a bit of a lean builder, but I also want to be a bit of a lifestyler. Like, you're probably thinking, how do I blend some of these into the equation? Well, that's what we're going to cover next time in the remaining 3 avatars, because they sort of include a bit of a blend. So hopefully this has been of value for those of you who are on the journey to losing weight, but also in the potential period of what do I do next? This will answer any questions that you may have.